Welcome back to the Prepared Mind channel. I'm John. I want to thank everyone for sponsoring us here on Patreon. I've got an interesting video for us, and it's about current events. It's about prepping. It's about the state of affairs that we're having to deal with here in the United States of America, and indeed the same problems are around the world. Just everyone gets a little bit of a different spice combination to it. So let's see how spicy this is going to get. Okay, here we are. I wanted to start with a story that happened over the weekend. Here in America, the United States of America, we had a yellow vest protest in Dallas, Texas. Link to that should be down below, and I'll see if I can get Jolene to do it. It was put on by the Sons of Freedom, and it was a guillotine march. Sounds interesting, doesn't it? Well, there were approximately 50 people that attended this yellow vest protest. It was very peaceful. They carried open carry rifles. It was carried downtown to, let me see here, Dallas, Texas courthouse. Police escorted them along the way. I don't know if it's because people were fearful of the weapons or maybe disturbed about seeing a guillotine. But the police kind of escorted them, but didn't harass them in any part of the video that I watched. While the delivery of the protest implement, the guillotine, was carried all the way to the very large courthouse building, carried up the steps, and several speakers came out and talked, and they said they weren't there to do anything except to offer a warning that the people can take the power back anytime they want. The speeches covered a variety of topics from government tyranny to government overreach. And I think this Sons of Freedom march was symptomatic of world dissatisfaction as well as United States dissatisfaction. Now, it was 50 people that showed up and participated in this, and it could easily be 500 in a day. If anything goes wrong with this country, with the economy, with police abuse, it can be 500 in a day. And if things appear to be tyrannical, it could be 5,000 in a day, and that guillotine could literally be put to use. This is, I think, the type of pressure that the people of the United States are under. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to break or act, and I'm not at all saying or suggesting that they should. I'm saying it's a possibility. Now, there's quite a bit of discussion out there over a partisan war, a civil war type event, but having to do with partisan politics. The people who believe in freedom can call themselves conservatives, Republicans, libertarians, Tea Party members. Sometimes they refer to themselves as anarchists. Basically, they want to live as freely as possible. They don't like taxation and regulation. And on the other side, we have a group of people, very large, not a majority, but they are becoming increasingly aggressive and violent and demanding, and they believe in statism. That is, the state has all the rights and all the power, and it is not, nor does it need to be justly derived from the people. It should just be because they say. These people are of the communist and socialist persuasion. And more, the Democrat Party is being co-opted by these socialists. And other Democrats who I consider to be less intelligent, rather than think for themselves, just go along with whatever the party politics are. Our country is being splintered into many different factions, and they're being pitted against one another. Divide and conquer. Yet the funny thing seems to happen all along, which is more state and federal government power. No matter how divided the people are or how much they try to get more freedom, we always get less. Always. Always. I can't think of a day where I woke up and went, I'm freer today. I'm going to pay less taxes today. I'm going to be regulated less today. We don't have those kind of days. We do get the other kind, which is more laws, more regulations, more taxes, and more threats of being put in jail. Now, I want to move on to the next subject. It's kind of a transitional, kind of a little cute segue here, if you will. If we start having events, shit hits the fan hotspots, if we start having mass arrests because of what is supposedly happening in Washington, if we have trouble, martial law, extreme rule of law because of partisan bickering and conflict, like we're seeing in Portland, like we have seen in Oakland, and in many, many, many jurisdictions in this country. Think Berkeley, think Chicago. Think of all the places where the people are getting out of hand. And maybe not in your neighborhood, and I hope not, but certainly many jurisdictions. We could end up with martial law. So there's been some discussion about that. What's going to cause it? What's going to happen? What you should do. A lot of discussion over what martial law is. Martial law, I think by definition, is a suspension of all previously adhered to rules, which mean constitutional rights. They can suspend the Constitution in times of martial law, and they have in the past, which means you are directed by a presumably benevolent dictator in local jurisdictions. It could be the police chief or commissioner or mayor, and they would exercise martial power, meaning they will do whatever it takes to keep control of the government in the government's hands. That does not mean that they will kill you on sight, but they might. It doesn't mean that you have to turn your guns in, but they could require it. It doesn't mean that there's a curfew, but usually there is. It doesn't mean the end of the world, but it could. Now, this is interesting because when the law is suspended, the law works both ways. It's supposed to keep us in line, and it's supposed to keep the government in line. With martial law, the government assumes primacy or sovereign superiority, and nobody can question it. They are not held accountable, at least not while the martial law is in existence. There were many policemen who were charged with murder for murdering people during Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. They murdered people. They had a state or case of what you could call martial law. A lot of it was captured on film and video. There were countless, numerous police and government abuses of the people and their rights. There were California Highway Patrol in New Orleans, which to me seemed odd. There were also National Guard brought in from out of state into Hurricane Katrina, and they went around collecting guns. Now, that is the fear that we, as free Americans, have of this notion, this concept of martial law, is that we'll just sit in our homes under orders and wait for someone with bigger guns and more people to show up and demand what we have. So in the event of martial law, what I can tell you is I'll probably have 145 on me, and I will take the rest of my guns and throw them in a lake or a river or turn them in, because that's all I'll have. Just the one. So when they show up, they can have the one. Right? Is that what they really expect us to do? Now, do you as a free human being have a right to defend yourself? You have a right from God. Does that mean you have a responsibility to turn your gun into a benevolent and loving, though dictatorial and all-powerful government? No, you don't have any obligation to do anything except what you feel is best for you. this concept of martial law, whether it comes out because of social unrest or it comes out because of this belief that Trump is going to call for martial law while he arrests the thousands and thousands of people from the unsealed indictments from all the criminal vermin and swine in the swamp. I don't think that they need to declare martial law to do that. I think they can go around and arrest people. So, you know, it's going to get hairy, or could get hairy. There's a lot of pressure and a lot of fear out there. But what I'm going to say is the government really doesn't have the power they think they do. And again, once again, I am not promoting this. I'm not recommending people do it. I'm saying if it were to happen, it would have a tremendous effect. Basically, law enforcement is carried out on the city and county level. State troopers really are so low in numbers they can't do anything. If the people, say 100 people, were to go with guns to the local police department and say the people are no longer going to tolerate what you're doing, and order the police to take off their badges, to take off their weapons, and take themselves and go home. They've been relieved of duty. That would either result in a gunfight, or it would result in the people taking back the authority. Just as the Sons of Freedom said that they offered a warning that the people can take the power back anytime they want. We are the ones who vote and agree and pay the taxes and say the government should observe our freedoms and rights and protect them and serve us. But the government seems to believe that they own us now. But the people really could. And if you say, well, 100 isn't enough, John. Okay, 200 people with guns standing outside the sheriff's department or the police department and demanding the surrender of the local authority figures that they have overstepped their bounds, they have violated their oaths, and they're being relieved of their duties, and they can go home. If that were to be done at every county sheriff's department, if that were to be done at every city police department, the whole nation would be free from tyranny being enforced upon them in a martial law environment. Now, if you tried coordinating this, you would be arrested for sedition or terrorism. If you recommended that people did it, you could be in trouble for that. And of course, I'm not. I'm just saying this would it not, if people were to do this? 200 people would say, you are relieved of duty. In every city, in every state, there would be no policemen left to run around and enforce dictatorial martial law activities. But if people sit in their houses and are individually, one by one, picked off, that is how the government likes to operate. If you sit in your home and wait for them to come and get you, yeah, you risk having your gun taken from you. They could search your house, I suppose. Right? They could question you. Then they could arrest you if they don't believe you. I mean, it's martial law. It's martial law. It's a scary concept. Very scary. So what are people to do? If martial law is declared, do you observe the police and the sheriff's deputies and the state troopers? And if they start to misbehave, then you take action before they get to you? That might be advisable. I'm not advising anyone to do that. I'm saying it might be advisable because you would be next, presumably. Right? Do you live in a community where you know the sheriff's deputies and you know the police officers and you can speak to them and say, hey, Fred, you're not going to do this? Right? Do you have that kind of authority? Do you have that kind of relationship? Do you have that kind of ability? Can you marshal 50 or 100 or 200 men and go down and say, that's enough of this, we won't have it anymore? Do you have the guts to do that? Do you have the balls to do that? Do you have the brains to do that? And what do you think the results would be? Would they call in other police from other jurisdictions? And are those other jurisdictions able to send people there to try and reinstitute order, which is martial law? You see, there's a lot of oddities that can happen if they try this. This is America. This is not France. This is not England. This is not Australia. It's not Canada. The people of Watertown laid down and let the police roll through looking for a child, a young man who presumably committed a crime. But if the police were going door to door saying, we're going to take your guns, do you think that by the time they got to the end of the block that there would be a different attitude developing? There very well could be. You know, there's a lot of people out there, and I'm going to have to stand up and say, you know, those hicks, those country hicks, they're going to be less inclined to give up their weapons than maybe softer people from Democrat jurisdictions. But maybe we'll see something like what they have in Portland, where the police will use Antifa and communists as their brown shirts, their Hitler Youth, and allow them to run wild and terrorize people and do their dirty work for them. It's going to be a strange place when shit does hit the fan. In the end, we could end up with a very peaceful shit hits the fan, where people know how to behave. A few people get hurt and shot because they're idiots and assholes. But for the most part, everyone could behave as well as can be expected. And martial law won't need to be declared. Because I believe that lots of guns make people into good neighbors. Right? And if everyone's carrying openly, and everyone sees that, everyone's going to know that there's nothing but a shit show if people start misbehaving. See, that was the idea and the concept behind the Second Amendment, was to make the government a good servant, knowing that the people could pick up their arms, go to the courthouse, go to the sheriff's office, go to the police department, and take it back. That has always been the threat that the government fears, and it has always been the threat that isn't discussed. We don't need to get in shootouts. We don't need to get in legal matches with the police. But people do need to have an idea of what it takes to restore law and order. It doesn't take police disarming people to bring about law and order. That is martial law. We want real, de jure, constitutional law. And that requires the people to have their freedoms intact. You know, that's what we really need to have. So starting out in 2019, we need to think about what do we need to do to support law and order? Well, we need to make sure that law and order are obeyed by both sides, not just the people, but the government itself. We can ask for it, we can demand it, we can shout for it, we can protest for it, and ultimately, the Second Amendment is there to defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So the moment you see martial law and you start to see abuse, don't think, well, that's just for those people and not for me. It's for everybody. And for policemen and sheriff's deputies, state troopers, there will be retribution, and it's sad. People will remember who did what, why, when, and where. The same way those police in New Orleans who murdered people were arrested and tried and convicted. They shot people in cold blood. Police did. There's lots of that, and it's terrifying, it's horrifying to see and to admit that this is what can happen, even in America, where we're supposed to revere the Constitution and obey the law. Unchecked, unbridled power, especially during martial law, shows what the human character will do if it is not checked by an equal authority. In the case of the United States of America, the people are not an equal authority. They are a superior authority to the government. And they have every right and the duty to overthrow an unjust and ill-behaving government. And it has happened. There is precedent in the United States of America of this very thing happening. The people of the United States, whether in whole or in part, can and have, and rightfully and justly so, done that. I hope it doesn't come to it. I hope the need doesn't arrive. But if it does arise, then the people have a responsibility to protect themselves, to protect others, and to protect the Constitution. It is, after all, just a helpless piece of paper. It's a proclamation. But if the police and the government will not obey it, then it is just that, a dead piece of paper. In order for it to be what? Viable, living, alive, firm, the foundation upon which government exists, it needs to be defended. And the American people, who are the benefactors, they need to be the ones to stand up and ultimately and openly accept responsibility for our precious Constitution. Scary times are coming. We could see bad behavior on the part of people and on the part of the government. We've already seen and witnessed horrifyingly bad behavior by people and government and bankers and lawyers and politicians and Wall Street traders. We've seen horrifyingly bad behavior from lots of groups of people, and they need to be held to account. It's called justice. And when there is justice, there is respect for the law. And when the law is respected by those, right, who live under it and those who are charged with administering justice and the law, when that all works, when the machine works, everyone lives in peace. And people believe and behave well. And when things get out of hand, as they are right now, that is when you need your weapons the most. That is when you need to be prepared the most. Right? Food, water, shelter, clothing, medicine, means of self-defense. Having a plan and understanding the world around you. Right? Knowing the government around you, knowing the people around you, knowing the law enforcement around you. Hoping and praying that they behave well will probably come about in a more positive fashion if they're talked to ahead of time. If they realize and understand, that is the police, that they are not the law. They are merely people wearing a costume, a uniform, but it is more rightly thought of as a costume with a badge. They're no better or smarter or capable than anyone else. They just have a costume on that we respect because it is supposed to be protecting us. If they fail to do that, right, we need to take those costumes from them. That's why I spoke of it that way, right? That is what's going to happen. We, the people, have a responsibility to protect ourselves when government fails to do its job. The Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Federalist Papers, and many, many, many examples of case law show where we, the people, have the right to protect ourselves. We have a requirement to protect ourselves and the state. Not the state building or the state government, but the state. That is the state of the forum, the people's state. Our state, our property, our lives, right, our fortunes. That is the state, not the government, the state. That is the real estate that we live on. We have a duty to protect it, not to protect the government. The government we can reinstitute, reconstitute in a matter of minutes. You discharge one set of government employees and you bring in a new set. You hold an election, they go to their office, and they perform. And once this happens, government will realize that they are not absolute, that they're not all powerful, that they're not just, and that they're not the law. As I hear so many government employees say. I see and hear it often, and it's disgusting and sickening for them to say, I am the law, like they're Judge fucking Dredd. They're not. They're not the law. They're just people wearing costumes. Robes, judges, attorneys have a title, but they're no better than you and I. Policemen, they're wearing a costume. Sometimes it's a bulletproof costume, but it's a costume nonetheless. I can put on a costume that's camouflage, right? That doesn't make me better or smarter or more deserving of life and liberty than anyone else. This is coming, and so you need to start thinking about it. Again, I'm not telling anyone to take action. I'm not telling anyone to make any plans that could be seditious or considered seditious. I'm just saying think about where we're at. Think about where we're at financially, socially, politically, legally. Think about that, where we're at. How the government likes to think it can take your guns and take your high-capacity magazines. Is it that kind of world we live in, or is it going to be something else? Lots of questions to ponder as things in Washington unwind, get worse, and get stupid. Now, today is Monday, and come Wednesday, I think the fireworks are going to start. At least a lot of shouting and wailing and gnashing of teeth. You guys be prepared. Get prepared. And it's not just having preps. It's mentally prepared and practicing with your preparations. Practice with your firearms. Practice thinking about your rights and your duties. Please. If I can tell anyone, just, practice having those kind of thoughts. It is my duty, it is my responsibility. And you'll find yourself coming to different conclusions than you would otherwise. You guys be cool. Semper Fi. Chance favors the prepared mind is yours. And I'll see you all again Wednesday. Bye-bye.